All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody here. We ask you to put your phones on silent or vibrate, and we will begin the April 18th meeting of Hewlett, and we'll start with a call to order, please. We'll go, Don, we'll just start with you. We'll do that way. We're self-introductions, and the clerk can follow us along. Thank you, Peggy.
Don Rocha, Director, Parks and Recreation Department.
Joe Zintek, Director, Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency.
Good morning, Harry Freitas. I'm the Director of Santa Clara, the Roads and Airports Department.
Jacqueline Anshano, Director of Planning and Development.
Mike Wasserman, County Supervisor, District 1.
Joe Simidian, County Supervisor.
Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive.
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Thank you all very much. Just looking at our speaker cards. We now go to item number 2, which is public comment, an opportunity for anyone to speak about anything not on today's agenda. And I've got, if you wish to do that, we have yellow speaker cards right up here. You just fill them out, put them in the holder. The clerk will pick them up and will recognize you. For item number 2, Supervisor Simidian, we have 3 people. So we will allow each of those people to be 3 minutes. And I'll call you up. Kathy Helgerson, Scott Largent, and Robert Aguirre. And whoever gets there first can speak first. Everybody else, line up in the queue. We'll keep this moving.
Hello, thank you.
Morning.
I represent CAP, Citizens Against Pollution, but I'm not going to talk about that right now unless you want to call drugs pollution, but I do call drugs pollution. We got a big problem with marijuana. I don't know if any of you know what a VIP pen is. They actually smoke cigarettes through this thing, and they actually smoke marijuana through this. And it has a drug, a very serious THC drug in there. And a lot of people are becoming ill, young people, and including my foster son, who I had to actually tell him to leave my home because I caught him using one of these things, and he's addicted. He's lived on the street, he's gone through all kinds of problems, and I tried to help him for probably about a year now, and it was very discouraging for me. So what I'd like to do is tell everyone that an employer can also do blood and urine test, and they can detect it. And if they do, they have every right to let that person go. I don't think a lot of people know about this. I don't think Santa Clara County realizes what's happening with this. And I would like to tell all of you that we need a committee to go and do something about this. Even though it's legal, that doesn't matter. And there's a lot of people getting fines for driving while under this drug. And I feel that it should have never been allowed to be legal. It's legal in other areas, other states, but it's legal here just recently, and we need to start working against it. It is affecting our young people under 18, high schools, junior high, you name it. My foster son was at Monte Vista, and they were doing marijuana back then, and they're still doing it. We need to get the schools together to stop this. Anybody can give any young person a tote on their VIP pen, and it builds a huge tolerance. I mean, they have to keep doing more and more. It's very expensive. They're taking advantage of these young people, exploiting them. And when you mix this with alcohol, we've got a very serious problem here. So I'd like to start a movement in Santa Clara County, and also I live in Cupertino, start a massive movement to stop this, okay, to really stop this. I encourage you not to open up any of these places where they can buy the paraphernalia. It's very expensive. They're exploiting our young people, and our kids are becoming very ill. My foster son was 28 years old. He spent time in prison. They steal for their habits. He stole from me, and the other day, I'm sorry to say, he pushed me down and hurt me. This is what happens to people like this. They go crazy, I guess. So I need your help. Please do something about this. Joe Simidian, I'm under your district. It could be a good cause for you to take up. I really think it's important. Maybe you could go to some of the schools and speak on the subject and bring some people along with you. Doctors, nurses, whoever, therapists. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Mr. Largent.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy. Scott Largent. Good morning, everyone. I've talked about the creek over right here off of Heading. I've been kind of documenting right before you get here near the crime lab. And sometimes I take the bus, sometimes I just walk from the Alameda over there where I live. And what I've been doing is I kind of walk up to the creek, and it's a very interesting place there. People have been hanging different designs and different trinkets, and there's wiring, and there's the gentleman over there has been on meth for a long, long, long time. And we're on about the 4th call from the fire department right there. And I was kind of trying to tally this all together, like how much it's really costing taxpayers, what's going on right on the other side of the crime lab right there. And I think with the calls for service and the cost of replacing that pumping station that's, you know, not going to turn on or turn on, the guys rewired the whole damn thing. The high voltage lines, the stuff in the creek, the cleanup, I'm thinking it probably costs about 50 grand when they get out there and do all that stuff. And I'm just wondering how much it would have cost to scoop that guy up and put him into rehab. Now, I know it has to be kind of that thing where they want to go to rehab, and I'm learning more about things that are going on with our state as far as being able to, it might sound weird, chain a meth addict to a bed to get them off the dope. I'm starting to realize they really have to want to get off of it. Is there anything preventative with stuff like that? I mean, shouldn't we be constantly cleaning that area? I mean, it's not like a normal encampment. It's like Lord of the Flies over there, and there's a lot of propane tanks, you know, 4 different fires they've had over there. I've also started filming the meth addicts at St. James Park. Now, that might seem kind of strange that I'm doing this, but they are going to die. So the thing is, they're going to die. So when they're on the corner and they're smoking meth, I walk over and I start talking to them. Most of them I ask, can I interview you? And I tried doing this last week where I just would ask, and they're just like, yeah, go ahead, start interviewing me, I'll talk. And I get right in there with the camera and I start talking, and it's shocking. They sit there and they start smoking meth right there next to the kids' playground. And I'm just really shocked that we're able to continue to do this. And I found out that meth is only a misdemeanor. I guess it changed. I thought it was a felony. Now remember, heroin's a felony. Now I would rather have that park down there all on heroin. Honest to God, I'd rather have that than them all on meth. The methamphetamine's making them go absolutely crazy, and they're spinning in circles, they're yelling at people, they're attacking people. The heroin wouldn't be like. It's just very strange. Meth is very, very, very bad, and that's what we're watching. We have a meth problem in Santa Clara County, big time. So thank you.
Thank you. Robert. Mr. Aguirre.
Robert Aguirre here. Thank you very much. I'm here to talk about whatever is the remnants of Hope Village. And I'm rather disappointed that both the city and the county kind of wiped their hands clean when the water district decided that they weren't going to just roll over and give that piece of land on Lelong and Willow to be the space for the new village to move into. I've been looking around, and I've seen a piece of property that the county owns, and it's right behind the social services building on, it's actually on Rock Springs, but the social services is, I think, 1875 Center Road. It's a big piece of land the county owns. We could just kind of level it and put a fence around it, and then let the people move back into it. I know that they're in hotels right now, and they're scheduled to be evicted from that very soon, and we have no real plan of where they're going to go and how they're going to go forward. But we had a group of people that were all working together trying to improve their lives. They were there for 6 months, and I don't know, there was never any metrics that were set up before to determine what was successful. When speaking with the Office of Supportive Housing, Keeley in particular, he said it was a failure from the very beginning because the people started out intense and they're still intense, and there was nothing improved about it. From his point of view, I can see that. But the fact is that people were kept safe, people were sanitary, people were actually starting to improve their lives. Some of the people got jobs, and maybe there wasn't enough time for people to develop as we would like them to, but it certainly provided that opportunity. And I would like to ask the county, especially Hewlett, because you guys are in charge of land, to look at some of these other properties and You know that I took Supervisor Cortese and his wife up there to Portland, and they thought that that was a very good idea, the way it was being run. And so the idea itself is not bad. And I think the big difference between Hope Village and what Supervisor Cortese saw was in Portland, it was self-governed. The people determined their own, rules and regulations. And as a result of that, they were actually more strict on themselves rather than having one person dominating over them and telling them what to do and running it like an outdoor shelter. So I think, given an opportunity, I would love to be a part of something like that, to bring that type of design to San Jose that I think, or anywhere in the county for that matter, to bring a place where people can go and be safe and secure.
Thank you. A quick question for you. The place you're talking about in Portland, the Hope Village model, would you say similar governance?
Not at all, because in Hope Village, it was top-down.
Okay.
Peter Meron-Kronk made all the decisions.
Gotcha.
And in Hope Village, in Portland, right to Dream 2,
community.
The community made the decision.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
That concludes the public comment portion of our calendar. We now move on to item number 3, which is approval of the consent calendar. Supervisor, on the agenda, we've got items 11 and 12. I would suggest that we can add 4 and 7 on to that, unless you have an objection.
Number 4 being the Vasona Lake, and number 7 being the report, the update on ordinances. I'm fine with that, and if you'd like a motion to approve the consent calendar with those amendments, I'm happy to offer it at this time.
Thank you. So the motion now is to approve items 4, 7, 11, and 12. I don't have any speaker cards on that item, so I agree with your motion. I'll second that. We'll consider that done. We'll move on to item number 5, which is to receive report from the Office of the County Executive relating to development agreement negotiations with Stanford regarding the GUP.
Good morning, Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive. This is our 5th monthly report, and if you'll indulge me a moment, I wanted to spend a moment providing more of the background. For those of us who spend our time daily on this matter, obviously, we have to remind ourselves that other people have not. So to remind everyone in the audience and Supervisor Wasserman, back in September 2018, the board did adopt 2 housing ordinances, one a housing impact fee and also an inclusionary ordinance that would apply to Stanford lands in the unincorporated county. And at that time, Stanford had proposed to the board that the county and Stanford enter into a development agreement negotiation, specifically based on their concern of this legislative action to require affordable housing with its development. In October, the board did, with conditions that the staff had recommended, did direct the county staff council to enter into development agreement negotiations and appointed 2 board members, Supervisor Simidian and Supervisor Chavez, to be on that team. We held our first meeting on November 30th of 2018, and the first order of business was to establish ground rules so that we would have a basis for having good faith negotiations and to explore the possibility that we could find a circumstance in which our respective interests could be addressed without compromising, things that were important to each party. We had at that time and have consistently communicated that one of the barriers to meeting quickly with respect to presenting our interests is that county staff and council were still in the process of updating the community plan, which is the policy document, our findings and the conditions of approval. And we did communicate in this process that we believe that they would be complete by April 30th, and we are, in fact, on track to do so. And so we did have ground rules finally approved by both parties on February 1st, and we did set up a second meeting of the ad hoc committee representing both Stanford and the county for April 30th, understanding that we would have that regulatory baseline established, and thereby both parties would understand what really fell within the realm of community benefits.
Excuse me,
Yes.
the baseline, through the chair, the baseline being the conditions of approval proposed by staff?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes. So moving forward to recent events that have been reported in various newspapers, we were advised, and this was through a press release that we uncovered, that Stanford was in discussions with the Palo Alto Unified School District. And we read from both the school district's representations and frankly from the press release that Stanford University issued that it was planning to bring the results of that negotiation into our development agreement negotiation. And what I would say is that when we developed the ground rules, we had contemplated potentially that circumstance and created a section, it's section 11 in the ground rules, that would forbid that. We understood that might be a possibility, and we specifically wrote the ground rules to forbid that. And while the ground rules were in effect, they entered into these discussions with Palo Alto Unified School District.
And that's the section referring to third party?
Yes, that's correct. And the day that the ground rules expired, we learned through another press release that, in fact, they had reached this conditional deal, and Stanford made representations publicly, and frankly, in discussions that I've had with their designated representative, they made it very clear they were going to bring this into the process, that was their intent, and it was contingent upon the county and Stanford reaching a development agreement deal. That was regrettable. It's very concerning and dismaying for staff because, as I said, we developed the ground rules specifically among many other provisions to prohibit that. And what I would say is, and this is the salient point, is that this was already going to be a very difficult process, and when you have a party negotiate in bad faith, sort of the foundation of trust, and you know this from your own business dealings, that is essential to be able to reach a potential agreement, is lost. And so the county on April 16th, when the county team did convene in the morning, we concluded that we weren't going to continue to negotiate with Stanford University, and we encouraged them to consummate a deal with Palo Alto Unified School District pursuant to their discussions to date, but that it would be independent of and separate from any possible agreement that Stanford and the county were ever going to negotiate. But at this point, we've canceled the meeting, and we are now at this point. And I would invite Supervisor Simitian if he had any additional comments to make with respect to that.
And just so I heard you clearly, you said you encouraged them to consummate their deal with the district.
Independent of and separate to any deal with the County of Santa Clara. That's correct.
Understood. Thank you. Supervisor Simitian.
I don't think I have anything to add except, my understanding, and I'll confirm it with staff, is that this path is something that they have had an opportunity to check in with both me and my office, as well as Supervisor Chavez and her office. And my understanding is that planning staff, county executive's office, Supervisor Chavez, and I are all in the same place on this, which is that at this point, it does not behoove us to continue with development agreement conversations.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm getting nodding heads. I don't have any speaker cards on this item, and it does not require a motion since it's only to receive report. So we'll now move on to item number 6, which I do have speaker cards for. And item 6, the subject matter is Stanford University's residential subdivision district. And the recommendation is to receive the report from the Department of Plan and Development relating to development density and potential build-out within Stanford, specifically the San Juan Residential Subdivision District, and the formation of an advisory committee for this area. Jack, we'll start with you, and I've got some speaker cards, which I'll have speak before any presentation you or staff has. Is that all right with you?
Sure, that's fine. Jacqueline Anshano. In the staff report, we were asked at the previous Hewlett meeting to submit a map showing the areas, the density. And so there's a map that is part of the staff report. It's a figure where it shows, it's in brown, and it shows the 8 units per acre density. And so we fulfilled the request so that they could see what that would look like. In addition, we are considering developing land development standards that will address the historic, the build-out, and that is something that will come through as we're developing the Stanford use permit. One question, we've received a number of letters inquiring about developing a citizens advisory committee similar to SIMPAC that would be advisable or work with us on the development of those guidelines, and the department can entertain that request. We have no issue with that. This concludes staff's presentation unless there are questions of staff.
Thank you. And a question on what you just said there at the end, Jack. On package page 12, the first page of the staff report, the bottom paragraph says, regarding the creation of the advisory committee representing San Juan District Department does not recommend. And then it goes on to give reasons why. And I thought I just heard you say you don't have an opinion on that.
Well, at this point, I was responding to the inquiries for the request.
Gotcha.
That we have 2 letters on item number 6, which is this item where they're asking for a committee.
Gotcha. And the staff report gave 2 good bullet points as to why you're recommending not going in that direction at this
Right.
time.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll call forward. We've got 8 or 9 speaker cards here. Each person will get 2 minutes to speak. I'll call you up. And please come on up in whatever order you get there. And we'll go with that. Perlmutter. I said the last name right there, I hope, Pearl. Sandra Pearson. Tanya Luhrmann. James Sweeney. That'll be the first group, then we'll call the second group. Thank you. And to be fair to everybody, each person gets the exact same amount of time. And we ask anybody in the audience if you agree or don't agree with what is being said, not to make any sounds either way, so that whoever speaking feels free and safe to express their opinion, whether it's pro or con a certain issue. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chairman Washman and members of the committee. My name is Perlmutter, as you mentioned, and I represent the Stanford Homeowners, which is a coalition of several hundred Stanford faculty and staff members and their spouses who own homes on the campus. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and thank staff for the work that they've done all along throughout this process in the most recent staff packet. I want to briefly address 3 issues that are also laid out in a letter that I submitted this morning. Staff's recommendation to prepare an historic study, the need for new zoning and development standards on campus, and I probably won't have time to get to my suggestion for some other issues addressed in my letter. On the historic study, we were encouraged and are encouraged by staff's recommendation, and I just want to add, I think to ensure a fair and uniform application of the study and the standards, it's imperative that the county oversee that study rather than leaving that in Stanford's hands. We also appreciate staff's recommendations to develop land use standards and regulations coming out of this process. And again, I want to emphasize that the importance of preserving the character of the existing campus residential areas doesn't depend on the historic nature of a particular home or area. All of the existing neighborhoods are worthy of preservation. And in fact, the existing community plan calls for enhancement of the character of all residential areas. The attachment A to your staff report shows what could happen if you do nothing and retain the existing zoning. You'll have essentially a cookie cutter campus with 2,300 parcels on the whole campus. That is, I don't think anybody wants that. I think you have the authority and the opportunity now to adopt zoning that is reflective of the existing character of the community. So where you have 1 parcel per acre, you could have 1 acre minimum zoning. Where you have 2, it should be a half-acre minimum zoning standards. The only thing I'd rather add very quickly is, I think with the suspension of the development agreement negotiations, there may be an opportunity to develop those zoning standards now as part of the process you're going through.
Thank you. I appreciate your concluding. And just for the record, we do have your letter here, and my land use aide as well, Supervisor Simidians, will go over that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sandra Pearson. I am a resident of Stanford. I live in the San Juan district. And I want to thank you for the excellent staff work that you have done and your latest staff report. We really appreciate that you have heard some of our concerns. We are feel very strongly about retaining the nature of all of our residential areas, and there are within the Sanford campus different zoning regulations that probably make sense because it's very different, the historic area from one of the newer areas. One of our concerns is that we really hope that through this process, Stanford will become more transparent in its plans. We do not see anything in the GUP that says what the plans are for the residential area for the next 25 years. And we are very concerned about the empty houses that are sitting in our neighborhoods, the large homes that have just been sitting vacant for a long time. We wonder what's happening to them. The university has bought them, but they sit there, and we have concerns about that. We have mysteries about one area that used to be known as Searsville. It's now Governor's Corner, and the university has bought all but one of those homes, I believe, and they renovated them, and there's this great housing shortage, supposedly, but many of these renovated homes are sitting empty. Why aren't they being at least rented or available to faculty? And we don't know the answers. Someone must know the answers, but as homeowners, we don't have the answers to those questions. So we appreciate you having heard our voices, and we regret that you have been put in an awkward position now with the negotiations as they proceeded with the school district, between the school district and Stanford. So we thank you for your courage and for your listening to our voices.
Thank you. And Ms. Lurman, before you start, I received a card from a Marvina White without an agenda item. Marvina, did you want to speak on this item number 6 or a different item? This one? All right, good enough. Thank you. Ms. Lurman, go ahead.
It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to address the board, and I thank you for your work. I want to take my time to add the voice of a homeowner to the importance of preserving and protecting the integrity and the character of the established residential neighborhoods. They're calm and beautiful neighborhoods. They give joy to those who live there and to the many who walk through them and run through them. I do understand the need for development. There are other identified places on campus that can be developed, and many unoccupied homes on campus which have not been placed on the market. I believe that the character and ambience of the faculty neighborhoods are worthy of preservation regardless of their historic status. The oak trees, the shaded areas, the tranquility, they lend grace to the campus. I want to voice my support for the importance of taking steps to ensure that future development does not adversely affect these neighborhoods. The county could reasonably include a policy which states that zoning should provide for the character of these established residential neighborhoods with compatible densities, setbacks, design, and landscaping. I urge the county to include a new land use designation for the oldest neighborhoods, which would allow for 2 units per acre for the oldest neighborhoods, where many of the houses are designed by Burge Clark, and 4 units an acre for newer faculty development. The Stanford already imposes zoning-like restrictions on campus homeowners, including restrictions on lot size, setbacks, and landscaping. Stanford is not bound by these restrictions when it develops lots. I believe it would be fair to bind Stanford to the constraints it imposes on its own homeowners. This would work towards ensuring a campus setting that so many people value. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as Mr. Sweeney comes forward, I'll ask that Christy Holloway, Whitney McNair, and Laura Jones queue up. Thank you.
Thank you. These issues that we're talking about are important to all of our homeowners. We need our entire community involved, not simply a small group. We need to do that in our neighborhood. The SCRL board, Stanford Campus Residential Leaseholders, has agreed to organize 1 or more community meetings on campus, encouraging all 900 plus of our households. We welcome county involvement, and we'd be happy to work with the county in arranging those meetings. We believe, though we have preliminary information from many homeowners, we believe that the vast majority of homeowners want assurance that the character of the neighborhoods is preserved, first. Second, we believe that a majority of the homeowners would not be served by historical preservation above and beyond the current countywide historic preservation ordinance. We think the current ordinance is a good one. We believe that because we're comfortable with the current ordinance and we don't need to go beyond that for our campus, we believe that the majority of homeowners would not be served by a survey of all the 900 homes on campus. There are 900 plus homes per campus. Have somebody survey all of those. We see no particular value given the existing ordinance. And finally, we believe that a majority of homeowners would accept and welcome zoning differentiated by neighborhood with larger minimum lots for some parts of the campus. But we need the broad group of homeowners to be involved in the decision, and if all the discussions are down here in San Jose, that won't happen. So for that reason, we're doing it. We'll do it on campus and want the county to participate with us. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
I'm Christy Holloway. Thank you very much for listening to me today. I want to speak to the independent advisory committee that has been suggested. I think just the incident that has just taken place with Stanford and the Palo Alto School District gives us some idea why citizens might want to have some kind of an advisory that is not in the form of the community resource group. I did belong to the community resource group after the 2000 GUP. I find that a very different kind of group and not as much on the conversational level that can open up the conversation. We need to be able to talk to the county, and we actually need to be able to talk to Stanford, but we have no real mechanism for that. We'd like to, through that group, we could improve the transparency and accountability in the implementation of the GUP. And because of the very scale of the development that is being suggested at Stanford, the residential area kind of slips off the side. I mean, I noticed on the first maps, we were a big beige glob, actually, with no definition whatsoever. We need that definition, and we are citizens of your county. We are taxpayers, and we would very much like to have the opportunity to have that advisory group so that we can remain part of the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Holloway, as you step away, I'm going to ask you to come back through the chair in a little bit. I want to make sure we hear from the other speakers first. No, but before you step away, Ms. Holloway, come back. I'm sorry to do that to you. The question I'm going to ask you is, you spoke to the fact that you didn't think the CRG could serve that function.
Yes.
The question I'm going to ask you to think about and then come back in a little bit is why the SCRL, Stanford Campus Residential Leaseholders Group, can't serve that function. I know that's an awkward question, and now my time is up apparently. Exactly. I know that's an awkward question, but I think it's part of the conversation we're going to have as we talk about whether or not there's a need for another group.
Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Whitney McNair. I'm the Executive Director of Stanford's Office of Faculty and Staff Housing. We find ourselves here today because issues were raised by community members during the public hearings for a new 7-home single-family project. The Cabrillo Dolores project represented an opportunity to add 5 additional homes during a time when adding housing supply is of great interest to the county, Stanford, and the community. What's before you today is a recommendation to prepare an historic study for the whole faculty subdivision and possible changes to development standards. This is taking a concern raised for one project and generalizing it to the whole community. It's really a solution seeking a problem to solve. The county promotes early and often public outreach, yet here is proposing something that might affect most of the 900 homeowners without clearly identifying the problem to be solved, without having meaningful community outreach to understand the issues, and may not even solve the initial concerns raised by the community. The cornerstone of my 20 years as a municipal planner was that each and every time the agency I worked for moved forward with a study that had the possibility of impacting so many homeowners, we'd make absolutely sure we clearly understood the issue, we'd hold meaningful and significant outreach to ensure community members had a chance to participate and, importantly, understand the impacts to them, and then we develop a solution to make sure the changes address the problem. The staff report indicates there's been one application for a subdivision during the GUP. Stanford, as well as the existing homeowners, approach development cautiously with thought, taking into account topography and trees and neighborhood character and design. Before you decide to spend time and money performing studies, we suggest you conduct public outreach and meeting with the residents of the subdivision to see whether the views articulated for one project are widely held by the rest of the community.
Ms. McNair, before you step away through the chair,
Yep.
I just want to ask, you do recall that the proposed subdivision that you referenced was approved on my motion and by a 5-0 vote, yes?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as Ms. Jones comes forward, I'd ask that Karen Hong, Ken Schatz, and Marvina White come forward.
Good morning. I'm Laura Jones. I'm the Director of Heritage Services at Stanford University. I manage the university's historic preservation programs. And what I really wanted to emphasize today is that before going forward on scoping the historic survey, it's vitally important to the success of historic preservation programs that they have community buy-in and support, and that the community understands what the goals are of the survey, the scope of the survey, the geographic limits of the survey, what the implications of historic combining district zoning are. There's a lot of confusion about this on the campus right now, a lot of rumor and misinformation, and I'm just really concerned that we do the outreach first so that people really understand it, because otherwise you come up with a survey result in the end that the community doesn't support. We had that problem in Palo Alto with our historic ordinance in 1991. So I'm really just urging that there be some information meetings in the subdivision first so that people really understand what it is and build widespread support for the effort so that if you're going to do it, it's successful in the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on forward.
Hi, good morning. My name is Karen Hong. I'm a land use planner with Stanford University.
Chair, if we could get a little more volume, I just want to make sure I can hear the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Karen Hong. I'm a land use planner with Stanford University. I wanted to ask the question if we could get more clarity on the role and purpose of the overlay map that was prepared, the zoning and planning questions that we're really trying to answer. From what I understand of planning, usually it's not a straightforward overlay. We usually have to take into account all of the factors that have been mentioned by other speakers, whether it's trees, the terrain, roads, community character, all of the above and more. And so we are a little bit perplexed in seeing that diagram as a tool used today to look into this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And our planning director and staff are here taking notes of everything being said. Please come on forward.
Hello, I'm Ken Schatz. I'm a faculty member at Stanford, have lived on campus as a homeowner for 15 years. I'm here as an individual, although I happen to have been co-chair of the Affordability Working Group for Stanford's long-range planning process. In that role, I read from dozens and dozens of people who, not surprisingly, are struggling to afford housing in this area. The housing shortage is massive. So my ask for you guys is that whatever you do in thinking about this decision and the GUP and Stanford planning more generally, is to facilitate and encourage the construction of more housing. I think architecture and historical character are legitimate concerns. I like architecture. But if we prioritize that over the needs of the dozens of people who could live in houses, we are saying that that historical character is more important than their ability to afford housing in a place that is not a crazy commute away from their work. We would be saying that their ability, maintaining historical character is more important than the effects on all the other people in this county, in this region, who desperately struggle to afford housing, and to those who are stuck commuting on roads that are clogged due to people traveling long distances to and from work. So my request is that please consider not just the preferences of those of us who are current homeowners at Stanford University, but also the impacts that this has on future homeowners who could live if more housing is constructed, and also effects on people more broadly in this county. Thank you.
Quick question, if I may, through the chair. And if you don't want to answer today, I certainly understand, because I know you didn't know that there might be a question. Does that mean that you would support the county staff recommendation in the GUP process to require 2,200 units of housing as a mitigation for development impacts, as opposed to the 550 that have been proposed?
You know, I haven't studied that fully, so I was part of the long-range planning process on affordability. My view is we do need a lot more housing, but my view is that it would be, I mean, I would like a lot more, you know, probably including more units being built. But I think it is crazy to think that that should be done solely in that way. I think we should think of all of the other uses of land around Stanford University. And I really find it bothersome, the idea that things need to be maintained exactly as they are for faculty, who include me, who own houses on campus. That can't take precedence over everything else. There are going to be impacts if there's going to be growth. I think there should be impacts on a lot of things. I'd get rid of the golf course, too. I mean, I think that's offensive that we have a golf course. But
I've had that conversation before and don't want to have it again, just to be clear. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the courtesy.
Thank you. And as Ms. White comes forward, I'll ask that Priya Graves, Kathy Helgerson, and Carol Ruth, our final three cards, come forward as well. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Marvina White. I live on the Stanford campus, and I'm also part of the SCRL. So I am here mainly to address you and ask that you suspend your decisions, or at least as your coming decisions about what to do with the recent proposals on the group calling themselves Stanford Homeowners, that you understand that many of us on campus have not been consulted or involved in the process that's developed and been brought to you by them. I would suggest that all of us be asked to go back to campus and involve all of those of us who live on campus in the decision to propose questions of zoning, for example, or historic preservation, for example. I want to talk a little bit for at least 1 second about the mission of the university, which is not to preserve the historic homes or historic neighborhoods, but to actually support the mission of teaching and research. And the purpose all of us are living on campus for is so that we are closer to those students we teach, so that we can be involved with them. And in order for Stanford to maintain itself, it also means recruiting people. If there are unintended consequences, which I think there are, with lots given way many years ago of 1 acre, now might not be reasonable for that to remain 1 acre. And if new zoning is considered, I would like all homeowners to be consulted about what that zoning will be. I read a proposal that there be 2, I think, on 1 acre lots and 4 on another. I was never asked. I live on campus. I have never been consulted by about any of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Priya Graves. I am not a Stanford resident. I am not in any way affiliated with Stanford. I live in College Terrace, surrounded by Stanford. And I'm here today representing the College Terrace Residents Association. I'm going to stick to exactly one point, and that concerns empty houses. We've heard from several of the speakers this morning that there are a number of units in the San Juan area that have been refurbished and are ready to be occupied and yet are sitting empty. The same thing is happening in College Terrace. Stanford has been buying up properties in our neighborhood, demolishing some of them and replacing them with newer homes. But they also have a number of homes, a couple of rental units that have been empty, in one case for several years. My question is, if this housing shortage is as urgent as we keep hearing, why are those not being occupied? And I'd like you to look into that. I'd like you to press Stanford on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And before our next speaker starts, I received a card from a Rhoda Fry. Ms. Fry? Yep. Item 7 we handled in consent, during consent already. Did you wish to speak on this item number 6? Already? Come forward, please. You betcha.
Good morning. My name's Carol Ruth. I'm a 20-year resident in the San Juan district of Stanford campus. And I'm here today to first of all, thank you for all your hard work. I know this is a very difficult issue you're dealing with, and there's many perspectives. I would just like to state a few things that come to mind listening to people who have gone before me. I don't think we're at a point where we have to make an either-or decision over historic preservation and housing on campus. There are over 4,000 acres on Stanford campus that can be used for future housing. I don't think any of us think that there's enough housing on campus. I think the question that we can't have both a historic district that speaks to the tradition of the old university as well as plenty of new housing, I don't think it's a choice that has to be either or. I think you can preserve history, and I think there's a real argument for doing that in our day and age, especially in Silicon Valley. But I also am in full support of utilizing lands that could be developed for housing on campus. So we're not asking for an either-or situation. I also want to say that there has been a lot of support for revisiting the zoning issue. There was a petition signed by over 120 people on campus stating that they had these concerns. And I think the more people that weigh in, the better. I think overall you're going to find that the majority of people have concerns about the current zoning being inadequate for the current situation on campus. And I also want to just say that I think it is a useful thing to have a historic evaluation of the neighborhoods. This would ensure that, I'm sorry, I'm out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy Helgerson, Cupertino. I'm here to warn everyone. I live in a cul-de-sac with 6 homes. I've been there for 35 years. People are building new homes, and they are renting them out to vacationers, and they're making a lot of money to pay their mortgage. I think Stanford better be careful with building new homes, with zoning. Cupertino right now is trying to figure out, well, how many people can we allow there? How many cars can we allow on the street? Because that's one of the problems. Too many people from transients, vacationers. The other thing is, who does background checks on these people? The other thing is, a lot of people that built these homes have children, bringing strangers into your home. It seems there's no regulation. This is something Cupertino's looking at right now. Joe Simidian, if you could possibly get with Cupertino and find out what's going on over there, because you don't want this to happen at Stanford. It would all interfere with the students trying to rent rooms. I used to rent out rooms to De Anza students when I was trying to pay my mortgage when I was a young person. It interferes with the De Anza kids trying to find a place because the people that have homes there that rent out the rooms are making a great deal, sometimes $1,000 a week. My son even asked me, well, Mom, why don't you just move and rent out your whole house? Boy, you'd make a fortune. And I go, I don't need a fortune. I'm happy right where I am, and I don't need any more people to live with. I'm asking you to look into these other issues before you go and build more houses. You have to talk about zoning. These issues are important. You can't have all of these people trying to pay their mortgage, and that's what's going to happen. These are going to be very expensive homes. Okay, 2-story, I don't know exactly, you've got a lot of square footage. They're going to have maybe mother-in-law houses in the back. You don't know what's going to happen. There is a big issue. Every city is facing mega communities. Cupertino and Better Cupertino right now are fighting the mega communities.
Thank you very much. Your time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Supervisor Wasserman. I had Rhoda Fry, and I had submitted my comments in writing. I'd also like to echo Ms. Helgerson's comments about the Airbnb phenomenon. That is something we need to look at. The other one is twofold. we can actually kill two birds with one stone. One is with affordable housing, the other one is with global warming. And that is when we build new, especially for affordable housing, we need to make sure that these homes are energy efficient. And there's an energy standard called Passive House. It's not about passive warming, cooling. It's a weird name, but it was developed in Germany. But really what it is, it's creating a very energy efficient building envelope. And what that does, it actually allows you to reduce your energy costs, and especially for people who are on limited incomes, the cost of energy is a higher proportion of their income. So that solves one problem. Also, using less energy, even if you're getting a lot of solar energy or whatever, if you use less energy, then you're also contributing less to global warming. The other benefits of having a tight building envelope is that you also need less solar energy, which means you need a smaller footprint for your solar energy, so you can build taller and have room for all the solar you need to bring power to those residences. So please let's see if we can also increase the building energy standards for new housing, and especially for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had Carol Ruth and Rhoda Fry. Done? And done. Okay? And that concludes, yes?
I did want to ask if we could have Ms. Holloway come back up, because on this issue in play about whether or not there'd be some benefit to having a community group of some kind, I wanted to ask again if Ms. Holloway's comfortable responding. And again, I understand people may not be at the moment.
That's fine. I'm just leery about the guy in the Dodger jersey back there, as far as asking him.
Okay. So, Ms. Holloway, you did explain why you were thought that the community resource group was not well suited to this function. But I wanted to ask about Stanford campus residential leaseholders.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for asking the question. It turns out that last night we had a very good meeting with the SRL board. Those of us from the Stanford Homeowners Group met with them and explained what it was we were about. And the beginning of my talk to them was, why did we not come to SCRL to try to protect our homes on the campus? And here's why. One, they are funded by the university. They are given their office by the university. They turn to the university for information, and they can often get information, but they get stonewalled in the same way that we do. They do not go out to the community and ask the community what their concerns are. It says in their incorporation papers that they're supposed to be interested in what it is we're interested in. Well, they don't ask us. As a matter of fact, the affordability survey that was mentioned left all Emeriti out. Now, that happens to be a great portion of the people who live on the campus. We're completely left out of that. So we need a body that can seek transparency from the university, feels independent of it, is not dependent in any way, and can keep these important issues for the residential area alive and being implemented during the implementation of the GUP. So that's my answer. Is that what you're looking for?
I just wanted to know what the rationale was for your position, and I've got it now. We heard earlier from somebody at SCRL that they thought they could play a role here, and I just wanted to make sure I had both.
Well, the other thing that I would like to mention is times have changed, and that organization has not changed its behavior. And I think the university has become more like a developer and less like a university partner. And that change is really a dramatic one for all of us.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think I got the answer to my question, and I don't want to presume too much on the tolerance of the chair.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That closes the public comment portion on this item. Ms. Anciano, I'm going to turn to you for any comments that you might wish to make.
I have no comments.
Okay, good enough. I'll turn back to Supervisor Simidian.
Well, let me just say one thing, if I may. The map that is attached to the staff report is a theoretical representation.
Yes.
It is not a proposal for us to change the zoning of that area. And I just wanted to clarify that because several of the speakers might not have understood that. It was just a theoretical.
Yeah, I think if I may, for speakers that weren't aware of it, that was a request made of the Planning Department previously, so you supplied that map as theoretically what it would look like. It is by no means a proposal.
That is correct.
Thank you. Anything else?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you. A lot to unpack here, Mr. Chairman. I think I will begin by adding my thanks from folks in the community who referenced their thanks to the Planning Department for pulling these, both the maps and thoughts together about how we might proceed. I think it's helpful. For those who reference their planning background, I have a master's in city planning from the University of California at Berkeley. Am AICP certified, or was until my dues expired, I think.
Excuse me one sec, Supervisor Simidian. Whichever phone that is, thank you. Go ahead.
And have been in land use decision-making roles as an elected official for 15 years at various different levels. So these are issues that I think we share a deep interest and concern in. I did think it was helpful, and it's why I asked at our last meeting on this topic, to have what Ms. Anshano describes quite correctly as a theoretical build-out of what it would look like if we had the existing 1/8 of an acre, zoning. And I don't think anyone thinks that there will be no development over the course of the next 20 years. By the same token, I don't think anyone thinks that we're going to see maximum build-out. That's why there's a range, there are minimums, there are maximums. They help us understand what is theoretically possible. They're not predictors of what is going to happen. That being said, I found it noteworthy and important that an area that currently has about 860 parcels could, under existing zoning, be developed to provide for 2,280 parcels, which is an increase of 165%. Do I think that's going to happen? No. Do I think there's going to be some increase in development in the area? Yes. Do I want to make sure that that's done in a thoughtful way that both accommodates the desire for housing that was referenced, but also acknowledges the existing neighborhood character, which is not static, which I understand. We all understand changes over time, but it's got to reflect some concern, at least for the existing neighborhood character and historic preservation issues that were also referenced. So thank you again to staff. I thought that simple graphic was helpful in understanding what is at least theoretically possible. And to me, it does confirm the fact that there's a need to revisit the 1/8 of an acre zoning in that area. Now, I want to be clear about what I just said, because people have talked about rumors and misunderstandings, so I want to ask for your help in not perpetuating rumors and misunderstanding. The word revisit means revisit. It means reconsider. It means think about. It means discuss. It does not mean there's a proposal to do anything today. And so one of the ways that we can make sure people have an opportunity to play a constructive role in this conversation is to make sure that they understand where we really are in the process. And so what you're hearing me say, and as one member of the 5-member board, but also as the district supervisor for this area, is the fact that there could be a 165% increase in the number of parcels, that there could be as many as 2,280 parcels, theoretically, given the current zoning. At this point, knowing what we know today gives me pause, and I think it's something we need to revisit. So that's my first observation. And I think it's probably also, at this point, Mr. Chairman, if you'll just bear with me for a second, I understand there's been some communication to folks suggesting that this is somehow an unexpected turn of events, given the fact that I played some role in the GUP process, some significant role in the GUP process 20 years ago. So I did just want to mention for the record that I've sent a letter to Mr. Sweeney at the Stanford campus residential leaseholders, and it says, in your email of April 4th, 2019, you reported that, quote, as far as I can tell, but I am not sure, that was Joe Simidian's doing, referring to the imposition of 1/8 of an acre minimum zoning. At least he was the final decision maker on the 1/8 acre zoning, end quote. And then the rest of my letter has just one paragraph. It says, I thought you would want to know that that statement is inaccurate. The decision on the zoning was made on October 30th, 2001, at which time I was serving in the California State Assembly and not on the Board of Supervisors, and had been doing so since December of 2000. And I should also indicate that you know, the matter that was sort of left open in the community plan, the general use permit, as a condition of approval at the time, was, you know, a condition essentially that said within 9 months of the approval that there would be this zoning, and that's in fact what the board did. But even that action to say, let's have some zoning within 9 months, took place on December the 12th, which again was after I had already gone to the California State Legislature. So I just want to, again, ask people, let's be careful about our facts. And, you know, I wouldn't for a minute suggest I didn't play an integral role in the development of the GUP 20 years ago. I clearly did. I'm very proud of the work we did then, just as the university has expressed its pride in the work we did then in terms of the housing, in terms of the traffic mitigations. But really what I would say about all of that is, so what? So what? 20 years later, I would hope we're all wiser. 20 years later, I would hope we would have learned from the experience of the past 20 years. I can't remember who said it, but there's a marvelous expression, which is that only fools and the dead never change their mind. And I just think we have to keep revisiting these issues and asking ourselves, what does the experience of the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years tell us? And that's all that I think was suggested at the prior meeting, and I think that's all that's been suggested in the staff report as well. As I say, I do support the staff recommendation around reconsidering the appropriate zoning for the area and the use of a historical survey to inform that process. But I do want to give people some comfort, I hope, which is that there's room for nuance here. This is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. When you have 8,000 acres, I think we're pretty clear that, you know, some parts of campus get treated differently than other parts of campus, and appropriately so. So whether it's the issues of neighborhood character, whether it's issues of density, whether it's issues of historic significance, I do think that, you know, it's important for folks to go off and understand no one is suggesting that there be some legislative fiat by the Board of Supervisors that slaps a one-size-fits-all one-size-fits-all mandate on the entire campus or on the entire area where there are residences. There is room for nuance, and you know, the historical survey, you know, appreciate some of the comments that were said. I've been through this in other venues. It's always a challenging enterprise. I do think that the enterprise needs to be done independently so that people have confidence in that. I also think people should walk out of the room understanding that, Ms. Anshano, a survey is a study. It is not, again, the implementation of any rules or regulations. Is that a correct understanding?
That is correct.
Now, I've been down this path before, so I know that, as somebody said, you say we're going to do a survey, that will immediately raise concerns on the part of some and delight on the part of others about proposals that haven't even been made yet. So I think we do have to be cautious about that, Ms. Anshano. But I do think it's important that people understand and communicate accurately and clearly that it's a survey, a study. It's not a mandate again. And, you know, just as an example, a historical survey could be expected to identify individual structures or perhaps groups of structures that doesn't need to encompass the entire 800+ parcels that currently exist on the existing map. So let me just ask Ms. Anshano, you can confirm that that's entirely a possibility?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I just wanted to dispel this sort of all or nothing notion that people have expressed concern about. And I would also say, you know, if you hear rumors, please contact my office. We'll do our best to get you a clarification. We've had a couple of cases like that just in the last week or two. You know, it's a busy time, as you all know, on Stanford Matters, so there's some bandwidth challenge, but we'll do the best we can to get back to you and clarify on that. I also, I think it might be helpful, Ms. Anshano, and I don't know if there's somebody here who is prepared to speak to this, but to clarify the extent to which the county's historic resources ordinances currently apply to the campus and the subdivision area.
I'm going to ask Mr. Eastwood if he would come forward.
Good morning, Rob Eastwood, Planning Manager. The Stanford residential subdivision is treated generally the same as the rest of our unincorporated areas, and they're subject to the requirements of the County Historic Preservation Ordinance to the sense that if there are resources listed in those areas on our inventory, they provide protection, as would any other unincorporated area of the county.
Thank you. So does that mean then that before structures can be demolished or altered, they're evaluated for historical significance?
If they are listed on the inventory, that is correct. We are currently looking into and verifying if there is provisions, if they are not, and there's evidence that the historic, that a demolition permit is subject to CEQA, and we could in fact stop it. But I'd say within the four corners of the ordinance, a building has to be listed in the ordinance to provide protection. I hope that provides some clarity.
Thank you. And Ms. Anshano, then does that mean that the study that the staff is recommending would consider, underline the word consider, whether some additional increment of protection is appropriate for either individual or groups of structures?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that's helpful. There was one area in the recommendations that I think people are struggling with, and certainly I'm struggling with, and that's the need for some kind of ongoing sounding board for planning as we roll out this process. I don't think the Community Resource Group is the right vehicle to provide that perspective on this particular set of issues. Because this particular set of issues, I think, is of interest to a more specific and limited group of people than the larger GUP issues for which we use the Community Resource Group. I mean, the Community Resources Group has representatives from other communities who are more understandably and appropriately concerned about what the potential impact of development might be on those other communities as opposed to the interior of the campus. So I think that is probably not the right body. And my recollection, at least the last time I looked, was that the Community Resources Group had only one representative from this particular area that we're talking about, the 800-odd parcels. For the record, I don't want to call your parcels odd. 800-odd parcels. And that the one representative there is an SCRL representative, as a matter of fact. So I guess what I'm saying is I think a focus group of one is probably a little too narrow to actually get the range of views, and we heard them here today, and that's what we would hope to do, is get that range of views. So I guess what I'd like to suggest through the chair, Ms. Anshano, is that planning develop a recommendation for maybe some time-limited group to provide input on the historical study and the possible zoning amendments. That doesn't have to be, I'm just going to say this, doesn't have to be a long-term administrative bureaucratic body that, you know, loses interest or where interest wax and wanes depending on, but I think, you know, I think the one thing we heard from everybody is please don't do anything without making sure you hear from us all. I think that's a legitimate request, and I think some kind of group, and, you know, we could put a time limit on it so that it didn't become a permanent body even when there wasn't relevant work to consider. I think that would be helpful. And I think, you know, in addition to that, you know, we could probably ask you to help create a public process that is even more robust and inclusionary and local, frankly, than what the county might typically use, given the number of parcels and folks who are affected here. Does that sound doable? Is that a way to get to yes on this, maybe?
We can put a recommendation and bring it back to Hewlett for
Thank you.
consideration.
And then I guess finally, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your patience on this, I think we're just here to receive the report today. So
Correct.
Again, people can be comfortable that nobody's taking any action without broader engagement. But there isn't really a reference to what next steps might be. So through the chair again, if I may, let me ask Ms. Anshano how we might take next steps in a way that works for staff and that is also acceptable to the chair of Hewlett.
If I may, then what we would do is we'll develop a recommendation, bring it back to Hewlett with next steps on how to proceed and with our recommendation relative to the focus group and a time frame that might propel us forward to resolve the matter.
That's certainly agreeable to me. It sounds like you're prepared to come back on a timeline for a zoning consideration, historic survey, and a public input process, including the possibility of a time-limited working group or focus group. Is that something that would come back May, June? What's your thinking? I know,
Beginning of June.
Mr. Chairman, if it's amenable to you, having something come back in June that would identify next steps and having it come back as a possible action item to be forwarded to our full board, I think, if that's required.
Thank you. Yes, it is. And just for clarification, it's coming back in June as a recommendation, possible next steps. These words are very important. You mentioned we are revisiting. It's not a mandate. The map that was presented was clearly marked at the top as theoretical. So words are very important. So I think the plan we have moving forward to continue looking at what's happening there and what might happen in the future makes sense. And we'll bring it back to a meeting in June, the exact date of which is yet to be decided upon. And when that date is decided, unless you wish to commit to that June meeting, if you're okay doing that, we can inform the public now that to look for it on that agenda.
On the June meeting would be
Yes.
acceptable.
You're okay with that? Okay, so that is our intention. And I think that's it as far as this item, since it is simply to receive the report.
I have one last just statement or exhortation to make to the public, if I may, and then ready to go to the next item. As my question earlier of one of the speakers suggested, I want to ask people, you know, we had a bit of a brouhaha around fewer than a half dozen additional homes. And we heard concerns from the neighbors, some of them, and we heard the university and its supporters say, hey, you know, we got to provide the housing. I'm hoping for some intellectual consistency when we talk about the housing mitigations attached to the GUP, because I think it's hard to justify a position that says, we want you to cut us some slack on a half a dozen units because we're here to help with housing, but to then say we're not prepared to step up to provide full mitigation on the housing impacts of 2,275,000 square feet. Thank you, and I'm ready to move to the next item, Mr. Chairman.
Microphone back on. We'll let the room clear for anybody that wishes to that was here on item number 6. Item number 7 was handled previously through consent. So we'll give you all just a minute to clear the room, and we'll head to item 8. All right, item number 8. This was, yes, from previous meeting, March 9th. Consider recommendations relating to public notification and access to code enforcement violations and actions. And Mr. Eastwood, we've got you here making a presentation. I don't have any speaker cards on this item, so please go ahead.
Sure. Again, Rob Eastwood, Planning Manager. I have with me Michael Rossi from Deputy County Counsel and James Stevens, who's the Code Enforcement Manager. This does respond to a referral from the Board of Supervisors from March 19th, 2019. The referral did ask the department to consider options for allowing public access and notification of code violations. As outlined in the report, we've looked at options for providing that. The department is recommending a two-prong approach. For the first prong, for all violations, we're recommending developing a web-based mapping tool. We currently use web-based mapping tool to notify the public of development applications. We've gotten good feedback on that. It's maps on the department's website that tells the community when someone's applied for an application, and we know many members of the community use that to get a sense of activity in their neighborhood. We would build off of that mapping tool to also wrap in code violations. And as we continue to develop what's called our insight process, which integrates our permit processes and our mapping, we would stand up that mapping program. So it would show violations in neighborhoods. Yet to go through the final details on the details that it would show, but again, at minimum, it would give an indication of if there's a violation on a property. The second prong would be for what we're calling serious code violations, or code violations that have significant community interest. And these are ones in which there's danger to health, safety, public, and welfare. Should the violation somehow impair property, roads, others that are off-site of a private property, or violations for which the department has received significant community interest, either through outreach meetings, letters, inquiries, and so forth. We provide a description in a bit more detail of what those means, and we can go into that. But if a violation was to meet either of those, that two-prong test, we would then conduct public outreach, and this could include a press release, notices to neighbors, and other types of outreach notices to make sure the community knows. We've used this a few times in the past. Just for examples, one, we had a violation that was an illegal dam down in South County that was holding back a body of water. There was a potential that the dam could release and affect downstream neighbors, and we did that sort of outreach. And then more recently, the Hewlett Committee might remember truck traffic at Stevens Creek Quarry. We had intensive community feedback on the interest of that. Based on
Excuse the interruption.
Yes.
Award for the understatement of the day. Already yours, the day's not over. Sorry, just couldn't resist.
Always like to provide examples, but in that instance, we also provided significant outreach to the neighborhood based on that community interest. With that, we'll close up the presentation, and the three of us are available for questions.
I appreciate that. And before we do that, I'll call on Kathy Helgerson to come forward, submitted a card. And you've got a couple of minutes to speak on this item, item number 8.
I would like Santa Clara County to look into Lehigh and the Stevens Creek Quarry code violations, which are many. Seems that Santa Clara County is doing nothing about those code violations. It's been going on for about 100 years, and they want 100 more years for another quarry. I find this to be extremely illegal. I don't know who's going to enforce this. I have no idea, but I know that code violations are actually criminal, and they could be fined, but they could also be imprisoned for their code violations. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe Mike or Joe can tell me if I'm wrong. Go ahead, mention it. Or maybe you should talk to your legal department, who also are doing nothing about this. I have been doing this for 14 years, an advocate against Lehigh and the Stevens Creek Quarry. Code violations are very important. Why do we impose code requirements? Why do we bother if we're not going to enforce these codes? And it seems Santa Clara County has never imposed a fine against Lehigh or the Stevens Creek Quarry for that matter. They've done a cease and desist order, but I had to push for that one. It's time that we impose these fines. We're losing a lot of revenue, and we're also allowing these people to keep breaking the rules, violating codes, and also it's very difficult to protect the public from these violators if we don't show some kind of enforcement. It's up to Santa Clara County to enforce the codes. Now, I don't know what you're going to do about this, but I'm going to harp on this over and over again, not just with you guys, with City Cupertino and the other cities that I know are in this valley, and they have to start doing something about these code violations. We are under severe danger here from the pollution of the air, water, and soil. Please do what you have to do your jobs.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment cards on this item. Supervisor, I've got a question of Mr. Eastwood. I'll take it away. Thank you. Rob, as far as the length of time on the website that notices go up, I'm thinking about, I know we wouldn't put anything on the website until, we're very complaint driven. So first of all, we go out there and check and confirm that there is in fact a violation and notice a violation, and then ultimately it gets on the website. I know we're not going to put anything on the website without due process, I'll call it that, and for reason. Once that violation has been resolved, corrected, done away with, I would like to see the notice come off our website. Me personally, I'm thinking 30 days after it's done should be the time that we give ourselves. There's no way it's the next day. But I think if we gave ourselves a 30-day window in which to remove it, I don't think it's fair to leave it on there in perpetuity or for a long amount of time for somebody who's been notified and corrected the problem. What are your thoughts on that?
We'd agree. We're still getting comfortable with our new database system. We know it has that capacity to link the status of permits and violations and what we show on a website, and that would be a principle we would use for removing them.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to toss that out for consideration as this moves forward. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for facilitating this discussion, and thank you to the department. I was pleased when I brought this issue to the board that there was unanimous support for the referral, but I do want to acknowledge, I think, trying to sort out the balance, if you will, is part of the conversation, and in fact, you know, while there was unanimous support, I think pretty much everybody shared the view that I expressed, which is I don't think we want to see a press release going out every time Mr. or Ms. Jones forgets to trim their bushes. I mean, that's not the goal here. I'm not sure what I think, candidly, about whether or not the notice of violation should stay up. You know, I'm thinking of our environmental health inspectors who go to restaurants. SCC Dine Out is the app. And if somebody has, I see somebody who's worked hard to make all that happen, you know, the fact of the matter is if you got a 93 on your last inspection, but your last 4 inspections prior were 62 and 67 and maybe worse, those inspections are still up, so people know that while there's been a recent fix, that there's been a history of problems. So I could, I could probably, I think I could probably bring myself around to your point of view if it would help generate consensus around support, Supervisor, but I just want to, but I do appreciate the clarity, because I was going to ask the same question about, so is the plan that it comes down after the notice of violation is cured? And, you know, I suppose you could make the argument that getting the thing off the website was also an incentive for people to, you know, make progress. So you could go back and forth on this one. I do want to ask for a couple of, I think, modest but important either amendments or clarification. I take the point that staff is raising, which is we want to do this for things that are significant, and you know how you define significant, of course, is going to vary from person to person. The language now, I think, says has the potential to immediately affect nearby properties or members of the public, and I just wanted to add the words "the environment." Is there any reason we can't specifically call out that impacts to the environment are part of the list? Ms. Anshano, is that, if the board wishes to go in that direction, is that workable?
That's fine.
Okay. So what I'm asking is that, as I say, impacts would be identified as those that have the potential to immediately affect nearby properties, the environment, or members of the public, and if that's agreeable, that would be helpful. And then,
sorry, just one clarification. I didn't mean to interrupt. I know often we have grading violations where it'd be arguable someone's removed a few trees on the property and just didn't want to give the impression that which is an environmental impact. Was the intent if it has environmental impacts that are a bit broader or could affect the broader environment? I just wanted to help give direction to the department on distinguishing the two, because we do have a lot of violations where anyone could argue the environment's been impacted, but it's not having a broader impact.
well, you're also talking, though, about affecting nearby properties, and anyone could argue that it does or doesn't affect their nearby property. So if we're, or members of the public. So I do think environmental impacts has to be part of what we're giving notice for.
If I may, through the chair, we may need to define the scope of the environmental impact and bring that back to you.
I would, on this one, I do have a strongly held opinion. Err on the side of notice. I mean, we just heard from folks who had a lively debate with a different point of view. The one thing they all said was, we need an opportunity to participate. You cannot participate if you don't know there's a problem. So we have an obligation to tell people there's a problem. So to be clear, failure to trim the bushes doesn't constitute an environmental problem to me. But if you're going to err, you ought to err on the side of public notice. I mean, it's a public document anyway, yes? So then the question is whether or not we're going to let the public have easy access to what is already a public document. And on that one, Mr. Chairman, just do a little real-time accommodation. If we can make progress on that one with that sort of more transparent approach, I can probably live with the take it down within 30 days after the notice of violation has been cured.
Thank you. If I may, I think what I'll ask, excuse me, is through Planning and Building Department that they come back with a recommendation on wording for us to consider. I know often it's left to our planning directors regarding whether or not to have an environmental impact report done or not. And so I think about some properties that might have done illegal grading to build a berm to put stadium seating in that might not necessarily have environmental impact. And I know of others that create or dig illegal grading that might redirect water flow that's supposed to go into a catch basin or into or out of a creek or downstream. That would have environmental impact. So I agree with Supervisor Simidian. If you could bring back some sort of verbiage that addresses his concern about environmental impact, certainly erring more on the side of notification than not. But I certainly know with all the grading issues in my district that a whole bunch of them, while they may qualify as code violations, would not have an environmental impact. So I look forward to your creativity.
And the last piece on this one, or in terms of my short list here, enhanced community interest. There's a little bit of a circular logic here that I think we need to confront, which is the staff report says Enhanced community interest represents a situation where the department has received multiple public inquiries regarding a code violation. Well, by definition, if we haven't told them there's been a code violation by posting the notice of violation, we can't be expecting them to have multiple inquiries about the thing that they don't know about. The whole point of putting the notice of violation up online so people know about it and providing some additional notice is to ensure that people do know so that they can make inquiries. So I think at a minimum what we ought to do is say that for any project or issue where there is a dedicated interested parties list, we will provide that notice. Is there any problem with that? I mean, you've got to, for example, I don't, on Lehigh, we have a dedicated interested parties list, and whenever we make a decision about Lehigh, we send out a notice to those people, or if we're going to have a meeting, we send out a notice, yes? Same with Stanford.
We could do that.
I think that's going to be important. And then on this webpage, is this the only way that we will communicate the fact that there is a notice of violation is through the webpage?
That would be the primary mechanism. Once, again, we have a new permit data software system, and some of the mileage you get out of that is you can actually transparently show all permit violations on your website. We think that the web-based system is the easiest way a community can go in their neighborhood and see it, but you could eventually go online and look up a property and get a full history.
The challenge, again, of course, Mr. Chairman, is realistically, are we expecting people to get up every day and go to the county website to say, hey, has there been a notice of violation? I think there needs to be some proactive communication. That's why I would like, if there is an interested parties list, could we, in addition to making sure that we notify, that we post the notice of violation, that we communicate the notice of violation to all individuals who are on the interested parties list?
Supervisor submitting, if I may interject, we have in the past been more affirmative with respect to notification, including using Nextdoor, which is one of the channels that many residents report is probably the most effective way to reach out to them. And so my point is we have and we will, and their judgment calls dependent upon the specific case. So we will, in fact, do more affirmative notification.
That may have been your experience. I have to tell you, more recently it has not been mine or that of my office. When there was a notice of violation on the Stanford campus, and I think there have been a couple, and to be fair to the university, this is an unusual event. This is not a recurring situation. But we specifically asked the then county planning director, to be clear, not the current county planning director, isn't that information that should be shared with the larger community? Don't you think you should at least, issue some kind of press advisory? And we were told no. And we were told that they wouldn't do it. And that we were told that if we wanted that to happen, we could do it ourselves. And we were further told that the only way that would happen is if there was board direction, which is the genesis of this referral in the first place. So that experience and direct communication with the former planning director does not give me comfort that this would happen. So I am asking very explicitly that if we have a notice of interest, if we have a list of interested parties, and they've said, please keep us informed about what goes on here, and if we have already decided we're going to post the notice of violation because there is a list of interested parties, that sending the notice of violation to the interested parties is an easy and appropriate thing to do, since we're communicating with them on the natural anyway. Is there a problem with that?
So we're talking about an email contact list that the department has received regarding this item?
Yeah.
If I may, through the chair, Michael Rossi, would you speak to that? Sending out the actual notice of violation, is that an issue to the interested parties? I'm asking from a legal stand, because I know some of the code information has some layer of protections over it, and I just want to make sure if you would speak to that.
Right. We don't generally disclose, once we've confirmed a violation, we don't generally disclose the name of a complaining party. That wouldn't be in the notice of violation, so there wouldn't be any issue in disclosing that. I was going to hit on a related subject, though. There is available technology that would allow people with an interest in property, especially those within proximity of a property, to get alerts about violations that are, for example, posted or noted within a certain radius from their residence. The county doesn't currently take advantage of that technology. Several neighboring jurisdictions do, and that would be a way to address, Supervisor, one of the concerns that you've raised.
I'd certainly be interested in hearing about that, but I'm not trying to make work here. I'm just saying if we already have an interested parties list and we already communicate with them about things that they would be interested in, I'm feeling pretty confident that one of the things they'd be interested in is if there's been a violation. So let's just tell them. And I'm going to ask that that be part of whatever comes back to us in for review and approval. And in the interest of comedy and getting to yes, Supervisor, I'm going to accommodate your position on item number 1, just so we're all in this together.
I feel so lucky.
Well, I'm here to serve, sir. So good. Thank you. I very much appreciate it. But you know, I got to keep underscoring. Hey, this is public information. Keeping public information as difficult to access as it possibly can be is not the goal of this organization, and it's certainly not a goal that I think any of us would want to articulate. Enough said.
Right.
Thank you.
I think we're all on the same page as far as that last statement. All right, we'll consider this report received.
I apologize. One last thing. Could we also have this structured when it comes back for inclusion in the policy manual so that it doesn't get lost over time? It needs to be a formal policy. Thank you.
And also item B is in Baker. We're forwarding recommendations on and look forward to your report back with suggested ways to achieve these things. Thank you very much. That was item number 8, A and B. We now move on to item number 9. We've got 5 different staff reports, Supervisor, that we have in our binders already. And I do have half a dozen speaker cards here. So I'm going to ask these speakers to come forward. You'll each have 2 minutes. Speak about any of the items on item number 9 that you wish. And then staff, when you're up in the lineup, if there's anything you can respond to what you've heard, please do so. Rhoda Fry, Paula Wallace, Kathy Helgerson, Douglas Muirhead. You are on 10. Doug, you're going to have to wait. No problem. My apologies. Welcome.
Hi. I've got 1,000 comments, but I'll make just 2. First, Lehigh has now submitted an omnibus RPA to cure the illegal road while adding 10 more acres of roads and over 50 acres of land area. The first RPA on this issue added 7 acres, the second 64. Please explain what is going on. Keep in mind that Lehigh refused entry to the county for this inspection, which is illegal, while illegal grading continued unabating, mowing down about 56 trees, not installing erosion controls, and likely not performing wildlife surveys. Lehigh turned an 11-foot wide light-duty road into a 40-foot wide heavy-duty haul road without permit. It is wrong, and it must be adjudicated. 2, we've got to be more protective of our water quality. When it comes to mining, did you know that Lehigh is mining below the water table, which causes Permanente Creek to run dry? They called it Permanente Creek because it ran all the time. It doesn't run all the time anymore because of this dewatering. Did you know that Santa Cruz County does not allow quarries to dig below the water table? Our county doesn't allow mining below the water table at Stevens Creek Quarry. It's in their RPA. Lehigh pumps up to 2,000 gallons per minute. By comparison, look at the city of Palo Alto, which allows maximum 30 gallons per minute for dewatering basements. The quarry materials pollute the water. As when they get stirred up, the metalloids get released, and then we get pollution. Water treatment is not perfect and involves hazmat to accomplish a suboptimal goal. 16 states in the U.S. do not have cement plants, including Hawaii and Alaska. Louisiana rebuilt New Orleans without a cement plant. Colonial America imported bricks and exported butter. We must not accept a degradation of water quality for the quarry's fiscal benefit. Please read my comments and look for ways to better protect our water quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And my apologies. We're referring to item number 9 right now, which is the report from the Department of Planning relating to the Stevens Creek Quarry, and not all the other departments. And thank you all for not
What is Stevens Creek and Lehigh?
making fun of me. You're there. You're done. You spoke correctly.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Thank you very much.
I read the reports all I want.
Yep. Next speaker. Yep. No, we'll come to 10 and Mr. Muirhead in just a minute.
Can you turn up the mic, please? Thank you. Okay, this is for Jack or Jacqueline. There, on your paperwork submitted out, was mention of a surface mining operation to include a second quarry pit. No, no, no. No new quarry ever. Now they want, Lehigh would like a major reclamation plan amendment after submitting 2 minor reclamation amendments, dropping one and and bringing through the other one. Right now we stand with a minor. I commented 11 pages. You all have it. I've submitted it to the planning and the board and also the city of Cupertino. I do not really understand how this could be done, Jack, behind closed doors, giving them information on how they can submit paperwork on a second quarry. Okay, this needs to be information that the public needs to have. There's a huge uproar in our community in Cupertino and the surrounding areas. We do not want another quarry. It should not be part of a major reclamation plan if and when they get ready to apply, which they tried once years ago. What they have to do is, this paperwork needs to stand on its own as an application. I have submitted also a map, which there's no overhang. There should always be an overhang here, but I want to show you this right here. You can probably see it. This is where I submitted a request for EPA to do a Superfund site. This is what Gloder Associates actually stated, that down here is where the South Quarry is going to be. The road issue between Cupertino and Santa Clara County is right over here. They're asking for 63 acres and 1.3 for the road. No road between the 2 quarries. No new South Quarry. And all of this land right here can also be taken over by the Lehigh Company. We do not want this. And what I'm stating here is that there was no reason for them to go to Jack.
Thank you very much.
And
We
ask
need to
for
be fair to
something
everybody. You need to
behind
terminate your
closed doors.
conversation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for all your work on this issue. My name is Paula Wallace. I live in Cupertino. My property backs up to Permanente Creek. I was a standing witness in the Sierra Club lawsuit against Lehigh that resulted in a $10 million treatment plant that treated all the quarry pit water that came out of that pit. That pit at one time was 700 feet deep, and it pumped in 2010, it pumped 18 million gallons of water out of that pit, untreated, into Permanente Creek, which elevated selenium levels. Water quality is really important to me, and I think that we can all agree that prevention is far more desirable than remediation. So I understand, Lehigh now is talking about a new surface mine. I understand that on vested lands, the county has a limited jurisdiction, but on unvested lands, the county can do much to mitigate the environmental impacts. And what I'd really like the county to investigate and hopefully pass is an ordinance that stops surface mining from going or interrupting the ground, the water table, the groundwater table, either to go below it or to interrupt it. I think it's really important that we protect our water. It's a huge issue. And, to have to treat water is also very energy intensive. So we'd do a great thing, too, for the environment if we could prevent that from happening. But if the county could really look into this ordinance, I know Santa Cruz has it, we have it on other mines, but if we could make a blanket ordinance that would prevent mining below it, the groundwater table would be awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our cards on number 9. Rob, Jack, any other comments you wish to make?
I'm going to let Rob go first, but I just want to let the public know, well, actually, I'm not going to let Rob go first. I'm going to speak. We have not cut any deals behind closed doors. With any applicant, an applicant has a right to request a meeting, and Lehigh requested a meeting with us, which is documented in the staff report, where we met with them and they presented their proposed project to us. We have not to date, unless Rob will clarify, at the writing of this report to the Hewlett Committee, we had not received a formal application upon the release of this report. The information that we receive on Lehigh, that information we put up on our website to notify the public. Every application that comes in, we're not sending out a notice to the public saying an application has been submitted, but we do update our website relative to the quarries. And with that, I'll let Mr. Eastwood speak.
Mr. Eastwood.
I don't have much to add. Lehigh did submit for a pre-application, so we know there's intense community interest, and we'll let the community know. We will post those materials on our website. It's not a public process. It's asking for feedback. Once we give that feedback, I'm assuming we'll post that letter also, as that's a public record. But that's the status of that proposed new quarry.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry, there shouldn't be any comments from the audience. Thank you. Supervisor Simidian.
No, I appreciate the report. There are obviously big doings in the offing, and I do think the change in applications has made this an even tougher moving target for the community to track, and that's going to create some angst, and that's understandable. But I think once we get clear about what's in front of us and what's the path and what's the process, we want to make sure that that's communicated clearly to the public, and that's both my hope but also my expectation. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, we'll consider item number 9 received. We'll now move on to item number 10. Mr. Muirhead, come on forward. You'll have a couple of minutes to speak about any of the items 10A through E that you wish.
Thank you, Chair, and still morning, so good morning, supervisors and staff. Record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. Plain white shirt, no sports logos, either for nor against your teams. Well, I would love to talk about our beautiful new Animal Services Center. I'm speaking basically on Consumer Environmental Protection Agency. There's lots of great stuff in the other departments as well, but I'm going to stick with CEPA. Good stuff happening with Animal Service Center. I feel I must talk instead about the decline of California's recycling industry and what the Recycling and Waste Reduction Division might do. As you know, we should reduce, reuse, and recycle. On the front end, let's reduce packaging. On the back end, producer take-back, which you call extended producer responsibility. As an individual, I cannot make manufacturers and distributors stop excessive packaging, and I don't have much choice when I'm trying to buy something that I need. Several years ago, the RWRC TAC, Source Reduction and Recycling Subcommittee, was looking at the combined purchasing power of all political jurisdictions in the county.
Through the chair, excuse the interruption, please. I deeply apologize for the interruption, but it occurs to me as this conversation is taking place, I have Johnson & Johnson stock, and I have been repeatedly advised, it's a modest amount, it's an inherited IRA, but I've been repeatedly advised by the county counsel's office that under the current rules, it's not appropriate for me to participate in any discussion or action on this subject. Now we're sort of pretty deeply in the weeds here. I don't mean that as a criticism. I just mean the budget document covers a lot, including producer responsibility and take back. But I want to turn to county council and I don't remember where you are on these issues, but it's going to be a little challenging if we both walk out of the room at the same time. I'll just put it that way.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to ask you, my position in these is the opposite of small. My understanding, though, we're just hearing public comment, and we're not taking any action today.
It's best to avoid any discussion as well on any of this. The best practice would be to recuse completely. And
we're talking about 10B as in Baker is what Mr. Muirhead's speaking about right now. Do you want the two of us to actually leave the room while he's speaking? If so, that's what we'll do. Mr. Muirhead will understand.
Again, I apologize for the interruption, but...
No, he's very astute.
Well, I would suggest that we'd suggest sticking to the best practice and not having you participate in any way, which means, yes, the usual process of recusal is to leave the room.
Okay.
But there wouldn't be any quorum then.
But the reason I'm saying that is Mr. Muirhead started out with our animal shelter and then has gone on to the drugs, et cetera, which is the area we have a concern with. I don't have an area with dogs and cats, and I don't know how much more, Doug, in your your time speaking is drug related. But anything drug related.
It's not specifically drug related. It's producer take back, which
then
involves that.
Yeah, we need to leave for that part.
And I'm not really. I don't want to have a. No, Mr. Mitra, for some other time, not in this moment where we're all just being confronted with the challenge in real time. My recollection is that the Political Reform Act of 1974 has something called the rule of necessity, which is that if a quorum is precluded from participating, that you then allow the minimum number to participate necessary to conduct the business, and that is a drawing by lot. In this case, since we can't have a committee meeting without two people, I think the rule of necessity might say that we both have to sit at the dais, but it's been literally years since I've looked at these provisions, so I'm drawing from both a long ago memory and what might well be changed law at this point. But for future considerations, we probably ought to figure that out at the...
Your answer, please.
We will consider this for future reference, but yes, there is a limited rule of necessity. It's very, very limited, very, very narrow, and it usually concerns when an action is legally required. So we'd have to maybe look at this a little bit deeper. What I could suggest as a solution is for comments to be confined to the non-conflicted areas, and then perhaps we can talk about this at a different forum where a quorum might be possible even after recusal of Mr.
Okay, Mr. Muirhead, here's what we're going to do. We'll put your timer back up to 60 seconds for beginners. If you want to talk about that issue, which we each have a conflict in, I'm going to ask Supervisor Smitty and I to leave the room. If you wish to use your last 60 seconds about that. If you want to talk about something else, we will stay. What is your pleasure?
Well, I came here because of the many things CEPA is doing. I wanted to advocate for one area of it. It's the area, unfortunately, that you feel I cannot...
We're going to step out.
Through the chair, then.
No, I mean, I'm done. It's an area I wanted to advocate for. I don't know how we can ever advocate for it if board members are conflicted.
I think, Mr. Mitra, correct me if I'm wrong, and through the chair, there's certainly no reason why, if we stepped out for the remaining minute, the speaker couldn't communicate his point of view to the professional staff who are responsible for preparing the budgets and for implementing the programs, and his point of view might inform their thinking, and they don't have a conflict. So I think that would be the best possible way, if it's permitted, Mr. Chairman, to make sure that the speaker's point of view does get heard by the professional staff, at least, even if you and I have to step away from the dais.
And Mr. Muirhead, during board meetings, there's 5 of us. The 2 of us recuse. That still leaves 3, which is a majority in the end. So there's not an issue. There's only an issue here in this committee.
But you're my favorites.
But I know. I totally get that.
That was shameless and much appreciated, for the record.
And if you need more time to continue in that area.
I mean, I would like to finish the comment,
we're stepping
I
out.
apologize for inconveniencing you. But, sitting is the new smoking, so good for the standing. So this has just blown my mind today, folks. Several years ago, our WRC Tax Source Reduction and Recycling Subcommittee was looking at combined purchasing power of all political jurisdictions in the county as a way to pressure for less packaging. I stopped going to those meetings because I come here. Were you successful, and is there more you can do on that end? The other I wanted to mention, much more important and much harder, is producer take-back. The county has had success with batteries and paint. If we cannot stop generation on the front end, at least have producers bear some responsibility on the back end. And that's my real ask for you, is of all the things you're doing, we have a problem, and that's my last sentence. You know, if you could turn local recycling industry into profitable enterprises, that would be wonderful. You probably can't do that, and so I'm only asking you to do the difficult and not the impossible.
Thank you,
very
Mr. Muirhead, for your public comments, and I'm going to, and the board members are now returning.
All righty, item number 10, we have no other speaker cards on that item, so we will now turn to staff, and 10A starts with planning and development.
Thank you. I'll go through the presentation, and I'm going to master this mic, and I'll go through quickly. So we are asking for 6 additional positions in this budget cycle. Those positions are 2 planning positions, administrative support officer, 1 accountant, 1 senior accountant, a permit technician and code enforcement officer. That also includes a vehicle. We are moving forward with our transformation modernization program, which includes implementing the business license program for the county. And we had launched our Insight program December 17th of last year, 2018. So we've only really been in operation for about 4 months, and we're working to implement some of the measures of success that were outlined in our proposal. The total that the department is seeking is $1,147,645. This fiscal, the new fiscal budget, 2019-2020, out of our objects 1 and 2. And unless any members have questions of me, I will answer those questions. Otherwise, I'll conclude and move on.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Simonian.
No questions, and thank you.
Nor do I. Thank you. 10B, Joe.
We do have a presentation that we could go through, or we can just answer questions, whatever your pleasure is.
We have no speaker cards, and I've certainly reviewed it with my staff. Supervisor Simonian, any questions?
I think we can forego the presentation, and I have no questions today. Thank you.
Agreed. 10C is in Charlie. None.
Same comment. We do have a presentation available, or can just answer questions.
Thank you. And your staff reports are so darn good. We are there in this step before it goes to the board, before it goes to the CEO, before it comes back to the board. So a total of 3 times this gets vetted. D, Harry.
We're available for questions on our report.
Thank you. I have none. Supervisor? None. And supportive housing.
There's a report in the packet, and we're available to respond to questions.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm good on that one as well. Supervisor Simonian? Okay, that concludes 10. We handle 11 and 12 in consent. 13 is adjourning to May 16th at 10 a.m. Thank you all very much. Oh, we have item 14. That's right, a item regarding Assembly Bill AB 705 by Assemblymember Mark Stone. And Steve Preminger, I've got. No, hello there. Take it away. Oh, almost.
Almost, yes. Good afternoon. Danielle Christian, Legislative Manager. I'm going to begin this presentation that I will try to make as quick as possible by talking about the issue of housing affordability. As everybody is aware, our state has a serious housing shortage that some believe has reached epic proportions. Housing costs have been rising rapidly for decades. The high housing costs make it difficult for many Californians to find housing that is affordable and meets their needs. Fewer than 1/3 of Californians can afford a median-priced home. while a majority of renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Housing is especially expensive in Santa Clara County, which I know is not groundbreaking news to people in the room. In February 2018, the California Association of Realtors reported the median prices of homes in Santa Clara County to be $1.38 million. In 2018, average rent for a one-bedroom in San Jose Metro was $2,460 per month. 3 cities in our county were in the top 10 spots for highest average rents in the United States. In our county, there is insufficient affordable and available rental units to meet the housing needs of residents who are extremely low, very low, low, and middle income. Mobile homes are an essential component of the affordable housing stock in California. Typically, a mobile home is owned by its occupant and located on rented space in a mobile home park. Mobile home parks are generally considered sources of unsubsidized or naturally occurring affordable housing. Some parks are specifically for older adults. In fact, the AARP reports that approximately 31% of manufactured homes, meaning mobile homes, are purchased by people aged 50 or older. According to data from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, there are over 17,800 mobile homes in mobile home parks in Santa Clara County. The communities of Gilroy, Los Gatos, Milpitas, Morgan Hill, Mountain View, Palo Alto, San Jose, and Sunnyvale have mobile home parks within their boundaries. Conversion of a mobile home park can disrupt hundreds of households when a park is closed and the property is transformed for new use. Mobile home parks in California are being converted to high-end developments at an accelerating rate. Data from HCD, the Housing and Community Development State Office, indicates that more than 15,000 mobile home spaces in the state were lost over the last 20 years. Conversion of mobile home parks further strains the local housing market, particularly the availability of affordable housing. Under current state law, there are notice requirements and potential relocation assistance to mobile home park residents. Current law requires a 15-day written notice that a park owner must provide that it will be appearing before a local governmental board, commission, or body to request permits for a change of use. Park owners are required to file a report on the impact. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with those P's, aren't I? A 15-day written notice, required to file a report on the impact of the conversion, closure, or cessation of use upon the displaced residents. The report must include the availability of adequate replacement housing in mobile home parks and relocation costs. The impact report is required to be provided to a resident of each park at least 15 days prior to the hearing on the impact report, but local officials are the final arbiters of any relocation assistance. AB 705 by Assemblymember Mark Stone provides more definition to state law and strengthens minimum requirements of mobile home park closure or conversions. It does not prohibit park closures, but it ensures that if a park containing low and moderate income housing is being closed or converted, it will not cause the unmitigated loss of affordable housing. It provides for more advanced notice that a park owner requesting permits for a change of use by increasing the days from 15 to 16 days. The impact report must also be provided 60 days before it will be heard. The impact report must include a replacement and relocation plan that adequately mitigates the impact on the displaced residents of the mobile home park, and the advisory agency or legislative body cannot approve or conditionally approve the report unless it will enable each displaced mobile home park resident to obtain and relocate into adequate housing in a mobile home park. Overall, the bill clarifies local jurisdictions' power to prevent the loss of mobile home housing by requiring a finding of approval for the conversion of parks containing low-income affordable mobile homes so that the conversion will not result in an unmitigated loss of housing opportunities for low and moderate income households. And I'm happy to do my best to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Supervisor Simonian.
Thank you. Do we have a representative of Assemblymember Stone's office here with us today? No?
Not that I'm aware of.
May I make a suggestion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is how you know it's me. On the one hand, I would like to be supportive. On the other hand, it is early going in a 2-year process. There are many, and I know this from my own experience and as someone who sought out the support of various entities when I was in the legislature, including the county of Santa Clara during that time. Sometimes people will say support, sometimes people will say opposed. Sometimes people will say support if amended. Sometimes they will say support in concept, which is a way of saying, hey, we like what you're trying to do here, but we understand it's early in the process, and we sort of reserve the right to take another look and see how it's going. I would be prepared to forward a favorable recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, which I think is the action we're being called upon to provide, or do you just need our committee to weigh in?
The actions are accept the report and forward a recommendation.
To the full board.
And the recommendation at your determination, staff is not making the recommended
Right.
position for your consideration.
I'm prepared to move that we forward with a favorable recommendation, a support in concept position.
I would second support in concept.
I have no other comments.
Thank you. I was involved, you mentioned Los Gatos, when I was on the Los Gatos Council, was involved with the mobile home park off of Highway 9, and the what was concerned to be a loss of affordable housing that was there was ultimately replaced. We learned that it was not a city's issue, it was the state of California's issue, and that the city had, the town of Los Gatos, had no jurisdiction whatsoever, that it was city only. So I need to learn more about this. I know there are things in place. This was very helpful. As far as information, the fourth paragraph down talking about existing laws and that local jurisdictions may require mitigation. I'm currently involved in something now with a senior facility in Los Gatos, the Meadows, that was giving notice to all the seniors there and the mitigation they're offering, what is or is not required by law. So I'm okay with in concept, because I do have some concerns about what more this does than what already exists.
Okay.
And that's as clear as I can be on that, Danielle.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we'll consider, we've got your direction. We've received the report. I do want to make, Supervisor Tamidian, before we adjourn to our next meeting, this statement for public purposes regarding 10B as in Baker, which dealt with SEPA earlier, where Supervisor Tamidian and I each recused ourselves. What we ultimately did, the report, while it was received, was simply moved forward to the board without any recommendation or action from the two supervisors here today. Thank you. And with that, now we are adjourned to the May 16th meeting. Have a good lunch, everybody. Thank you. With all that we covered, I think it was a long meeting, but it was, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, nice.